he created his nationalist paradigm. It got him elected, and now he owns it. And it's not going to work with Donald Trump. I wish it would, but it's not.
After bashing Trump as an existential threat to Canadian sovereignty, Prime Minister Mark Carney now sits powerless in Washington, begging the very man he vilified to overlook Canada's massive trade surplus and defense freeloading. A new Canadian leader has arrived in Washington facing the consequences of an election strategy built on anti-American hysteria rather than policy substance. Victor Davis Hanson, renowned military historian and Hoover Institution senior fellow, dissects this diplomatic disaster. The stakes are devastating, hypocritical, and entirely self-inflicted as Carney confronts Trump's legitimate demands with empty nationalist rhetoric. Let's start with how Carney got here, by exploiting Canadians' fear of becoming America's 51st state.
Trudeau was a failure. The Conservative candidate had a 20-point lead. He lost it partly because Carney was the champion of Canadian nationalism and said, we're never going to make a 51st state.
This wasn't a genuine threat. It was Trump's negotiation tactic that Carney weaponized for political gain.
It's kind of like what Trump did with Panama and Greenland. It's a way of art of the deal. We're never going to make Canada a 51st state. You need a majority vote of the Congress.
The establishment media won't tell you what Hanson knows. Carney's campaign was built on a lie that even a freshman political science student would recognize as impossible.
The Congress is never going to vote to admit Canada because the left would feel it was an infringement upon their sovereignty. We were imperialists, colonialists. The right said, why do we want another New York or Colorado to screw up the country? So it's not going to happen. Carney knew that, but he ran on it.
But Carney's deception goes deeper than campaign rhetoric. What happens when a leader elected on anti-American sentiment must suddenly negotiate with America? Here's where the real problems start.
But now he's in a conundrum. He's got to come to the White House. Trump knows what he did, so Trump is reminding him about the 51st state. But there's two issues, and they don't look good for Canada.
What the mainstream media won't tell you: Canada spends just 1.37% of GDP on defense while hiding behind America's security umbrella, the lowest percentage among NATO allies failing to meet commitments.
Number one is, in 2014, all the NATO countries promised to spend 2% of GDP. And under Trump's prodding during the first term, and then the Ukraine war during Biden's term, it has frightened most of them. And there's only 8 of the 32 nations about that have not met their 2% obligation. Canada's one of them.
Canada's military contribution is not just small, it's embarrassingly deficient.
It's one of the least cooperative of the 32 nations. In other words, it only spends 1.37% of its GDP on defense. It won't kick in another $40 billion to help arm it. And you could make the argument that it depends on the United States.
Why would Canada refuse to pay its fair share? Because America has become its free security guarantee.
It looks at that if there's any hostile activity, cartels, they're down there in Mexico with the United States between them. And nobody is going to proverbially mess with Canada when the United States has it under its nuclear shield, Alaska, early warnings, you name it.
Meanwhile, Canada exports 95% of its oil to U.S. refineries because geography makes it too expensive to ship elsewhere, yet maintains punishing tariffs on American dairy, poultry, and agricultural products.
The other thing is, they're running up a $63 billion trade surplus with their partner. And most of it is because they have a thick sulfurous crude oil that's in the middle of the country. And it's very convenient for them to go right across the border and sell it to us. And we like it, and we can refine it. We have the refineries that can deal with that type of difficult crude.
The geographic reality gives Canada few other options for its oil exports.
It'd be very difficult for them to send it all the way to their east or west ports and make the same profit. 95% of their oil comes to us. We're a good customer, in other words. Why would they not then say, we'll try to import more poultry, cheese, agricultural products? We can't get down to zero, but we can cut the trade surplus by 20 or 30 billion. You're our neighbor, but they didn't do that. And so he instead whipped up, it was very successful to whip up Canadian nationalism, very successful to win that election. But then where do you go from that?
The diplomatic circus we're watching is the direct result of putting campaign theatrics ahead of honest statesmanship.
He could have had a statesman-like message both during the election and when he saw Trump. He could have said this: Donald Trump is trolling us. We're friends with the United States. He's trying to needle us so that we spend more money on NATO and we lower our surplus. And we're going to do that. We're going to negotiate. Don't take him serious. He's just doing this like he did to Panama. We're good friends. He kids us, we kid him. But he didn't do that. He tried to whip it up, and it was successful.
What the media refuses to acknowledge. While Panama and Greenland responded to Trump's negotiation tactics by addressing real issues, Canada doubled down on nationalist rhetoric without solving any problems. Now, Carney faces Trump without leverage, credibility, or solutions. Let's be clear, America doesn't need to ship oil through Canada, but Canada absolutely needs American refineries for its thick, sulfurous crude. This economic reality exposes the hollow nationalism that got Carney elected. Carney's nationalist theater exposed the dangerous trend of elite politicians who campaign on sovereignty fears, only to find themselves powerless when faced with economic reality. If Canadian leadership had chosen honest diplomacy over election fear-mongering, today's negotiations could have focused on mutual prosperity rather than Trump's justified demands for fairness in trade and defense. This isn't just about Canada. It's about the global pattern of leaders who use America as a punching bag to win elections, then expect special treatment when reality hits. Trump's demand for fair trade and shared defense costs isn't bullying, it's the basic expectation of any sovereign nation dealing with its allies. And that's the truth the media won't tell you. Enjoyed the breakdown? Hit like, share your take, and subscribe for more expert playback.